All right, good morning, guys. I'm actually not teaching in front of a class today. I'm going to do kind of a mock lesson. I haven't been able to be in the classroom this past week since Tuesday. I had some family issues come up. I wanted to make sure I had something to post because I know next week is spring break, and I didn't know how long it would take to get everything graded and posted. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over kind of what I would do during the day and go over this lesson and just kind of walk you through it. So the first thing I would do is take roll. As soon as everybody got in here, I would go over all the announcements. We do a bulletin here. So I would read over anything that they need to do, anything from lunch menu to sports to whatever needs to be announced. After that, when we started, I would talk to them just a minute just to get started on the class. But I would have this already pulled up on the board, and I would tell them to get out a sheet of paper, and we would start our bell ringer. This would be a bell ringer. I would make sure they knew it would take 5 minutes to complete, no matter what. That way they would have an answer. So I would go to this, and I would read off every question to them. Now, I would always read off every question just because I have a big class and this is a big classroom, and if the people in the back can't see it, I want to make sure they know what we're doing. So before I would start the timer, which would be on the board up here at the top, I would read every question first. So the questions are, what is the purpose of having a government? What should the government do for the citizens of a country? How much power should they have, should the government have? And what should happen when they don't adequately do their jobs? So after this, I would start the timer and I would give them a time to complete this bell ringer. Now during this bell ringer, I would be walking around kind of just to make sure everybody is writing answers on their paper and to make sure everybody understands what we're doing. Now, when this is finished, the timer goes off. I would go to the next slide, but I would talk to them about the bell ringer. So what I would do is I would ask each question individually, and then I would ask them to raise their hands to see if they could give me an answer. And if nobody wanted to, I would just call on somebody. I would pick somebody that I know either had a good answer or I wanted to hear what they had to say. Now on that bell ringer, the last two is kind of opinionated questions. So I would want them just to get involved and just to think and tell me what they think. I would tell them we were going to talk about types of government today. The next thing we do is, first thing is talk about a democracy. So I would ask them, what is a democracy? I would let them answer, and I would let them tell me, or I would call on somebody. Then we would watch this video, which I will play now for you. Well, I said I would.
The word democracy comes from the Greek words of demos, which means people, and kratos, which means power or rule. So democracy basically means the rule of the people. Democracy first started as a direct democracy in Greek cities, notably ancient Athens, where people came together to speak about their...
All right, so that video wasn't playing, but I promise it just played a second ago. But as we finished that video, we would move on and I would ask them what they thought, but then we would talk about the first democracy, which would be in Athens, Greece. Now, during this presentation, I would also be having them taking notes. So everything I would talk about and I would put on the board, I would make sure they're writing down in their notebook. One thing I do is make sure they take notes because sometimes on the test, it kind of gives them an incentive to use it on the test if I need to, depending on what class I have. I teach two different classes. So I have an honors class and I have a general class. So usually in my general class, I will let them use notes on a lot of their tests, depending on how many IEPs and 504 plans I have in that class. Okay. So as we're going through this, I would have them take down the notes. We talk about a democracy. The demos means people, kratos means rule, and we talk about Cleisthenes, which is the father of democracy. Now they would also hear that in that video. I wouldn't ask them to take notes during the video because I would want them to watch it and pay attention and listen to it. But even though they already heard that, I would still make them take notes afterwards. We would talk about in the first Athenian democracy, the three groups there were, be the ecclesia, the boule, and the dicasteria. Then we would talk about each of these, what they were. The ecclesia made decisions about war and foreign policy. They wrote the laws. The boule had 500 men that were picked and handled everyday activities, decided what was worthy to go before the ecclesia. And the dicasteria was hundreds of men chosen to serve in juries. They judged those who broke the laws, and they settled conflicts among citizens. I would make sure they would write all this down because this would be on the test as we took it moving forward. The next government would be the Republic, which would be the Roman Republic. We would go over that. I would make sure they wrote this down. And then right after this, we would have our first group work, okay? So I would tell them to get in groups. Usually I do 3 people. Sometimes I'll just let them get a partner, or sometimes I'll do 4, depending on the size of the class. But usually with this one, I would just do 2 or 3. And it'd be in your small group, create a Venn diagram of the differences and similarities between the 2 governments. I would want them to draw this on their paper and create it themselves. Now, I would make them turn this in, because if I didn't make them turn this in, they probably wouldn't do it. So as they finish this, finish this group work, we would move on with the lesson. Now, they would have already completed how is a republic like a democracy and how is it different in their Venn diagram, but then we would watch a video comparing the 2 and seeing if they understood what they wrote down as the same thing. The next thing, we would talk about different types of governments, just a few different ones, like an oligarchy, aristocracy, and a monarchy. I would make sure they're getting this down in their notes, because this is an easy matching thing on their test that they would be able to see. The next few we would talk about moving on would be capitalism, socialism, and communism. Now, I know we're kind of going all over the place with different kinds of governments, but that is kind of what we're going to do moving forward with the lesson. Each day we will dive deeper into each one of them and compare them. This is just for the first day, looking at all of them. So we would have a video on this one as well. After that one, we would talk about Karl Marx, how he wrote the Communist Manifesto, what he believed, everything moving forward, and how that compared with communism, fascism, socialism, and all that. Now, this would be our primary source activity as well with the Communist Manifesto. I would actually read these to them and make sure they understood what we were reading, and then they would actually get on their Google Classrooms. I would already have this pulled up. There's a link here. I would have it pulled up on their Google Classroom so they can pull it up and see the actual Communist Manifesto as they read. This would also lead into our primary source activity. They would be able to read through it, and they would highlight the things that they thought were important. Now, I would make them do this individually at first. Then I would let them compare it with the net person beside them on what they took on their notes. After I gave them time to do that, we would talk about communism and socialism, which would be some of the things that they would have read and how they compared in their primary source activity. We would also cover fascism at the end, just to make sure we understood the differences, and we would watch a video as well. After we finished that, I would go over kind of a summary of what we covered for that day. I would actually be walking around throughout to check their notes as they're taking them and as I'm talking. So that would give me opportunities to see what they wrote down, what they understood, which ones are actually paying attention and not. And then I would have a government worksheet, which would already be posted on their Google Classroom, or I do have students who are not allowed to have iPads, so I have copies already made over here. So as they leave the classroom, they can grab one, and that is what they would complete for homework. Now, the ones who completed it on Google Classroom, they can either turn it into me on Google Classroom. They can write the answers down on their own sheet of paper and give it to me the next day. Either way doesn't matter, because different kids, they like doing it different ways. Some of them like to write it down. Some of them like to do it online. I don't care either way. I never make just one opportunity. Now, if I want them to write it down, I'll just give them a copy and I won't put it on Google Classroom. But I like doing it separate because I have 3 or 4 kids in different classes that are not allowed to have iPads at all. Their parents won't let them, and they've signed something that said they are not allowed to have one at all, and they don't have their phone. So they actually have to do everything on paper. That is easy for me to do because I don't have to make 90 copies of everything. I can just make 3 or 4 for those kids. But it's a lot easier to deal with Google Classroom with the other kids because they can just turn it in online. They don't have to keep up with paper. I don't have to read the bad handwriting or anything like that. After that is completed and they get their worksheet, that would complete my lesson for the day. I know this was not actually teaching a class, and I appreciate y'all watching this, and I hope this was a solid lesson. Please let me know if you think I should change anything or anything like that. If I get back in the classroom and I'm able to teach a lesson after spring break, I will do that and post it so y'all can give me some pointers or anything that you think. I appreciate it, and I hope y'all have a good day.